right, students, we are continuing the lecture from Tuesday, and I think we called it the Unit 1 lecture or Unit 1 miscellaneous terms. Let me tell you a little bit about the AP macro exam. And I think, let me see, I think this is my 6th year teaching it. It might be my 7th. Anyway, 2015 was my first year. So 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It's my 6th year. Okay, so I got 5 years experience under my belt. My first year, I was totally over my head. What I did was I had a whole bunch of kids sign up for it because the year before I had taught, I think, 4 periods of, a couple of years before that, I taught 4 periods of AP World History and a couple of Euros. So I had a lot of kids who had known me and felt comfortable with me, and they thought, oh, we'll take Russell for AP Macro. And the teacher before me had, I think, a 15% pass rate. The year before that, it was 8%. So I had a whole bunch of the smartest kids on campus, and you're going to hear me tell the story a lot. I totally made a fool out of myself. First semester, Mr. Smith, the AP Physics teacher, who was salutatorian here, was in that first semester, and he can tell you, if you don't believe me, how little I knew what I was doing. But I had one kid in the back of the room that had micro, and he was one of my water polo players, and I would get up and do math on the board, and he would say, "Psst, Coach Russell," and I'd go back and he'd say, you did it wrong. And anyway, so I had a lot of trouble, but I had a 73% pass rate that year, pretty good for your first year. And so a whole bunch of kids started signing up for it. Anyway, it took me a while to figure all this stuff out because I'm at heart a history teacher. But here's the way the AP Macro exam works. AP World and AP European, the exam is 40% multiple choice and 60% essays. This exam is roughly AP Macro 67%, 67% multiple choice, 33% essays. So it's like 2/3 and 1/3. So here's what's interesting about this. It is entirely possible. Now, we don't know how this year is going to work out. We don't know if we're going to be successful bringing everybody here, on campus, second 9 weeks or at the semester, if we have a vaccine or not. But it is entirely possible in this exam to pass the exam with basically just on the multiple choice. But I have figured out you've got to get something like up around a 92, 94% on the exam. I haven't done the math in several years. So it is possible to pass this exam without getting any points on the essays, just leaving the essays blank. And so just want you to know it is possible. Like AP Government, I'm pretty sure you can't pass the exam without getting points on the essays. You definitely can't on any of the history exams. I don't know about AP Art History, but that's not a real class anyway. Tell Coach Hubris I said that. What's he going to do about it? Anyway, he's one of my best friends. We're like brothers. Don't agree on politics maybe, but we're good friends. Anyway, let me get back on topic here. So you can pass this exam without getting any points on the essays, but I will tell you, very few kids can do that. In a normal year, last year was not normal. In a normal year, I can get about 60. I can get most of my AP Macro kids up to about 60, 65% on the multiple choice on a good year, as on an average, which means they probably cannot pass the exam with just that. But here's the thing: there are 3 essay questions, and my goal is the first essay question, we call it the big one. Essay question number 1, it's not really an essay, I call them that out of habit, they're FRQs. FRQ number 1 usually has about 8 or 10 points. They throw out what I call scenarios. I know the word is scenario, but it's a redneck thing. I call them scenarios. They throw you a scenario, then they say, okay, we're in a recession, draw the recession. Then they say, what can the government do about it? Draw another graph. What can the Federal Reserve do about it? And I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you on basically the second day of lecture, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Most of my students cannot pass this exam unless they get a few points out of the essays. And here's what I'm here to tell you. It's pretty easy to get a few points out of these essays. there are 6 graphs you have to know. And we're going to learn number 1 today. We're not going to learn number 2 until like 3 or 4 weeks from now. And one of them we're not going to learn until, second 9 weeks. But this is the first one. I'm teaching it to you the first week. And so I want you to put this title on your page. It's this is called the Production Possibilities Frontier. And sometimes I want you to write this and abbreviate it. Sometimes it's called the PPF. Sometimes it's called the PPC. And I saw somebody calling it the PPG. I will call it the PPF or the PPC. Sometimes I forget which one I've called it, and I'm not trying to be tricky. To me, they're the same thing. I use the terms interchangeably. Okay? And so what you're going to learn here today is one of the 6 graphs. They're all important. I'll put it this way. If you can get like a 60, 65% on the multiple choice, if you get to the essays, there's 3 of the essays. There's the big first one, and then there's 2 smaller ones. And I'm pretty confident I know roughly what will be on the first one. The second 2, hit or miss. I don't know that. So my goal has always been to have my kids get at least a 60, 65% on multiple choice, get to essay number 1, and by the time they're done with essay 1, they guaranteed have a 3. A lot of my smarter kids will already have a 4. Okay? And then we'll move into, if you can get points on the second and third one, you're going to get a 4 or 5. And normally I have lots of 5s. I think 2 years ago, I think I had 10 5s. I know I had 10 5s in Euro last year, which is the most I've ever had. But in a good year, I get tons. 2 years ago, I had more 4s than I had 1s. And I hate to tell you this, most seniors get 1s. And anyway, I don't want to depress you the first week of school because of this thing called senioritis. Hopefully you've never heard about that. All right, let's get on with this now. So this is called the PPC or the PPF. And here's what I want you to know. AP macro graphs are oversimplified. So write that down. They're oversimplified. They generally only look at 2 things at a time, and they do that on purpose. This is not a calculus class. It's not a geometry class. It's not a trigonometry class. So if you're a little bit worried about math, you do need some basic facility with math. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's learn this first graph. So let's say we have a country. And so on your paper, write down country of. Why don't you put your name? There's on these AP macro essays, and I have tons of these things from the released exams. They usually have weird names for the countries, and it's usually the name of one of the professors on the test committee. So just put your name there, country of. If you don't want to put your name, you just put country of Russell. And let's say country Russell can only produce 2 things. And here they are. All right, now, so we're going to do some writing today, but this is not, for those of you who had me for history, you don't take notes in here like you do in the history class. So what I want you to do is I want you to copy this on your paper. It need not be pretty. Just rough it out. Okay. And basically, this country of yours, I'm talking while you're copying this chart down. I want you to get in the habit of this. And you just rough it out. It does not have to be pretty at all. I mean, if you're really lazy, you can take a picture with your phone, but why be that lazy? Just write it down. Okay, so this country can make 2 things. I know that's stupid. What kind of country in the world can only make 2 things? Welcome to economics. Okay, this stuff is way oversimplified. And it's because we're not really worried about how many pizzas and bulldozers they can make. We're worried about getting you to understand basic economic concepts. I can tell you, and if this makes me sound like an arrogant jerk, so be it. I'm comfortable with that description, I guess. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm here, in my mind, to have as many students as I can pass the AP exam. I've had over 100 the last 3 years in a row. I would like to keep the record going. I'm not even worried that much anymore about my pass rate. I want lots of kids to go to college and not have to pay for their class because they passed their exam. Okay, and if that makes me an evil person, a capitalist, again, I'm comfortable with that. But let's say your country only makes 2 things, pizzas and bulldozers. So what we're going to do is we're going to graph that. Now don't panic. I know you all know how to graph. By the way, you remember that first year I told you about? You all know how to graph a lot better than I do. Seems to me there's two methods of getting an economics teacher, an AP economics teacher. You can either get a math teacher who's really good at the math, or you can get someone like a history teacher, maybe who has a facility maybe with explaining things. I am definitely not the math type. You can figure out whether or not I can explain things. So anyway, I'm going on to the next slide here. All right, so if you've got graph paper, you can use it, but the truth of the matter is you can just rough this out on a piece of paper, okay? And so just to show you how badly I did my first year teaching, what do you say first? Dogs or cats? What do you say first? Jelly or peanut butter? Doesn't everybody in the world say, I'm going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? So if you met someone who said, I'm going to have a jelly and peanut butter sandwich, you would have to wonder about that sketchy individual. So what letter do we always say first, Y or X? Well, I've always heard it X and Y. And so the first year I was teaching, I had these genius kids in the classroom, like you guys, and I got up and I pointed to that axis on the left there, and I said, this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis, and everybody in there laughed at me. Pretty humbling for someone who's supposed to know what they're doing. Someone with a degree in accounting. So to this day, when you guys come into the classroom and you see me draw one of these, you'll notice I always pause, because I'm always tempted to say this is the x-axis on the left and the y-axis on the right, and I have to do it backwards. And I always go through this little thing, and there's a reason I'm telling you this story. There's a lot of memorization involved in this class. People who tell you memorization is not important, tell that to the person who's got a combination opening on their garage and they can't remember the combination and it's storming outside. Who can't remember the key code to get into their phone. Memorization is important. So I have to stop and think X and Y. I'm telling you too many stories already. Okay, so anyway, what I want you to do is go back to this schedule. That's what this is called. And I want you to graph those things. Now, let me explain what this means. This country can make 200 pizzas or 0 bulldozers. They can make 160 pizzas or 20 bulldozers. What that means is they can make either or a combination of. But if they make 200 pizzas, they can't have any bulldozers. So if they're going to make 20 bulldozers, they're going to have to give up 40 pizzas. And that explains this concept of opportunity cost, which we're going to get to here in a few minutes. All right, moving on. So I want you to graph that, and I don't care how ugly it is, and I want you to draw a line connecting the dots, okay? And so you can just pause the video and do that. And so what you're going to come up with is this. Whoa, that is not what you're going to come up with. This was supposed to move. All right. Technological difficulties here. Did I tell you I wasn't that good at psychology? Technology. By the way, it is not after 9 at night, and I'm sitting here drinking a cup of coffee. I have a Jeep coffee cup that Carmen Yanez gave me. One of my prized possessions. Anyway, when you graph that, this is what you come up with. So, and this is a production possibility frontier. And I'm going to give you a brief explanation of what you're seeing here, and then we're going to go on and learn a little bit more. Remember, we're trying to get you set up. This is your Thursday lecture, even though it's Wednesday night right now as I'm doing it. This is your Thursday lecture to get you ready for Friday's essays. Okay, or FRQs, whatever. Remember, they're going to be fairly easy, and if you're listening to me, I'm going to tell you exactly what it's going to be. I do that every year. All right, so anyway, if you graph this, you should see this. And what you see is your production possibility frontier. What you see along this line, these are all the different combinations your country can produce. However, so it's making pizza, but it wants more bulldozers, it's going to have to give up some pizzas to make more bulldozers. Let's talk about what those letters mean. I'll give you a brief introduction about what they mean, then we'll come back to them later on. First off, E, anything along this line, and you don't need to write this yet, you're going to write it later on, but just be listening here. Anything along this straight line is, I'm going to give you some words, you don't need to write them down. Anything along that line is possible. Now remember what this is. This is the production possibility frontier. Anything along that line is efficient. What that means is, if your country's, all its factories are working just like they're supposed to be, you can produce somewhere along that line. It may or may not be desirable for you to produce that combination of products, but anything along that line is possible, and it is efficient, meaning you're using your resources effectively. Okay, now, so if I was in class, I would ask for a show of hands, or I would just ask a random question. I'm not real big on making kids raise their hands unless it becomes a problem. But just think about this. If you are producing at E or anywhere along that line, if that means what you're doing is efficient, what must producing at letter I mean? And usually I have 5 or 6 kids a period get it. That means if producing at E is efficient, that means producing at I, which is producing less pizza and bulldozers at the same time than you could be producing, then something is wrong, which means it is inefficient. Okay? So if E is possible, did I use the word possible? Yes. Anything along that line is possible and it is efficient. What must you be? Again, if I had a bunch of kids, some kids would know this. Point U is impossible. But now here's the caveat to that. It is impossible at this current level of resources. What we want countries to be able to do is produce at point U. So remember, I haven't told you this, but the goal of economists is economic growth. Okay? If you're paying any attention at all to this election, Trump is in pretty serious trouble right now. Mainly because his major overwhelming thing he had going in his favor was the economy, which is in the dumps right now. Now the stock market, I got to tell you, which is not the same thing as the economy, but it's basically people's ideas about the economy is sky high, I can tell you that. And we're going to do, most of you've heard about the stock market game we do, we're going to do it. Whether we're at home or school, we're going to do that, and you're going to have fun when we do it. This is the class that does that. But what everyone in this election, what Biden and Trump are both going to be arguing is they're the best one to make our PPF, the U.S.'s PPF, expand outward. If you want to help poor people, if you want to get people off government assistance, get the economy booming. As the economy is booming, everyone is going to have a chance to get a job. If you remember, it was like a year ago, your dog could have gotten a job. I make jokes about that. They were desperate. There's help wanted signs everywhere a year ago. And so the economy, there's a lot of other issues in this election, but the economy is usually number one. And at your age, I know some of you parents have a lot of money and you have a nice house and a nice car. And some of you's families don't have that much money, but I can tell you, when you get a little bit older and you got the house payment and you got kids in college, the economy and how much money you're making becomes overwhelmingly important. And I know some people say that's evil. Again, I've said this before, but anyway, I'm going to get off topic here. What every economist and every politician's goal is to move that line outward. So U is not possible yet. But if we're lucky, one day we'll be able to get there. All right, let's move on. Okay, so my PowerPoint is not working like it's supposed to be working. All right, so let's go ahead and draw this. We're going to do a lot of drawing today. Okay, so you can just pause it and draw this. Again, it doesn't have to be pretty. And you don't have to do all those, hyphenated lines here. Just go ahead and draw this. Okay, hopefully you've drawn this by now. I took economics when I was a freshman in college. I was 17. I never will forget, the professor was like 25, and she was very cheerful, and I sat up front and smiled and made eye contact. And whenever she looked at me, I smiled at her and didn't understand a dang word she said. But the first time she drew this, I never will forget, I do remember this, and this was 40 years ago. She did a PPF, and I never forget what she wrote. She wrote guns on one side and butter on the other. Guns and butter. And even at 17, I'm like, this is stupid. What kind of country only makes guns and butter? And who would want to live in a country that only made guns and butter? Now, of course, I get the big picture. And again, if we were in class, remember this is an oversimplification, I would pause the video and I would ask you, who can tell me politically, there's your hint right there, what this represents? And because, I'm doing this in a video, I'll tell you what it represents. This is really like an American government question. You'll have that next semester. Your country can either produce defense, your country's either concerned about defense or food. Okay? And so the argument is in American politics is we have two majority parties. A lot of people have been crying for years that we need to get rid of the two-party system. But I think it's here to stay. Every so often you should learn this in APUSH. They change your name from the Whigs to whatever, but there's two parties. One of our parties is more obsessed with defense, and the other party is more obsessed with providing food to the poor. Or you could argue there's a lot of different ways to phrase this, but this is really a political, what is your philosophy? Okay, and if you had me for AP European last year, we learned about Adam Smith. I'll talk about him a little bit later. Anyway, guns and butter. Okay, you drew this. Now this time, I want you to copy down what I'm saying. Okay, I'm watching the clock here. We're at 21 minutes into this lecture. I'm going to stop about 40. Okay, but this is pretty much what I'm going to give you for your FRQ tomorrow. I'll call them essays, but it's an FRQ. Okay, so you draw this. All right, so here's what I want you to write underneath where you drew this. Write points B, D, and C. Write it just like that. Points B, D, and C are possible, efficient. There's a third word, but at 9 o'clock at night I need a sip of my coffee. I'm forgetting what it is. I have lots of senior moments these days. I pretty much told you already everything you know. It's productive. It's efficient. I don't want to say it's desirable, because you may not want a country with all guns, because then you'll starve to death. And you may not want a country with all butter, because then we're going to get invaded by somebody like, I don't know, Trinidad. But the deal is, you need a little bit of both. The question is how much, and I'm not going to tell you the right answer, because there probably isn't a right answer. So B, D, and C, that was no offense against Trinidad. I just picked a random country. Okay, so one of my top water polo players was from there, and he married the Olympic gold medal goalie. She won the gold medal from the Americans, and if you ever see the USA water polo posters that are all over swimming pools, I'm sure most of you don't, because you don't, competitively swim. If you did, I think I would know you. But that's his wife on the posters. His family was from Trinidad. Anyway, so I'm not picking on Trinidad. It just came to mind. Okay, so B, D, and C are possible and they are efficient. Write down point A is inefficient. And then write point A is inefficient, something's wrong. Let me give you some examples of what could be wrong. We could be in a recession. A hurricane could have hit the United States and knocked out all the power. We could have run out of coal. Of course, I guess if we ran out of coal, it would no longer be possible to produce it, B, D, or C. Scratch that example. But something is wrong with the country. We could have a pandemic. Something is wrong, and our country is not producing what it could produce. Have you ever gotten in trouble with your parents? I never did. Liar, 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 pants on fire. But have you ever gotten in trouble with your parents or your grandparents lectured you and stuck their finger in your face and said, you're not living up to your potential? You could be making straight A's and you're making C's or D's. That's point A. There's something going on. Something is out of balance. There's something wrong. Point X, I want you to write this, is impossible at this current level of resources, but desirable. We want to be there one day. And then go back to A and you put A as inefficient. Also put down as undesirable. We don't want to be there. Why would you ever not want to produce at your potential? If you're a water polo player who can make 10 goals in a game, why would you want to make 6? You're letting your team down. You're not living up to your potential. So we want our economy to be efficient. All right, I think I about beat this to death. Okay, look at the clock here, 24 minutes. Okay, so here is tomorrow's FRQs. There's a slight possibility I'll put it off to Monday or Tuesday, but I can't think of any reason why. And I don't want to. I have found with seniors, they always want me, don't give it to us on Friday, give it to us on Monday. When are your grades going to be better? Let me tell you, Friday. They'll be better. So here's the deal. Question, you're going to get a question on what's the number one problem in economics? Scarcity. That's all you have to do is write one word. I'm probably going to give you an example of something and say, what is this? Which of the four factors of production is it? And then lastly, I'm going to say draw a PPF and pick two products. I like it when they're, what's the word? I used to be an English teacher. No one can believe that. A middle school English teacher. Alliteration, when the words begin with the same initial consonant sounds. Be creative. Now, don't put hookers and hockey players. Don't put anything indecent there. I like to put horseshoes and hand grenades. Pick your own, and if you can't come up with anything else, just put guns and butter. But some kids are really, some kids will put Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, just put something cute, just because I find them entertaining. And life is, boring, so why not spice it up when we can? So you're going to draw a PPF. And I'm going to say, draw a point, and I'll give you the letter of the point, and I'll say that's inefficient. Well, that's going to go where A is. One that is efficient, it's going to go along that line. One that is impossible, it's going to go where X is. Simple. That's your FRQs for tomorrow. All right, let's see what's on the next slide. Let's go see which other technological bombs can I drop. Okay, let's write, not bombs, mistakes can I make. All right, so write this definition down here. And by the way, while you're writing this down, I will tell you, some of you may have gotten excited when you heard, I don't know most of you, but some of you I know. Some of you, you can't see the top. It says, what is a PPC? Some of you get excited when you hear that you can pass the exam just based on multiple choice. Let me tell you, the multiple choice questions in AP Macro are difficult. Every so often for fun, I'll take the exam. I can't get 100%. I usually miss one or two, and it's always got something to do with interest rates or inflation, international exchange, but I generally get a 95 or 96. I could probably get 100 on a Euro exam. AP World, I could get probably 90%. And I know what you're thinking. I'm dumb. I don't care what you think, as long as you do well on the exam. But I'm just telling you, it's not easy. These are tough questions. And you're going to find this out when you take your first multiple choice exam. They are not a walk in the park. All right, so let's write down some, go ahead and write this. They use the PPF to illustrate things. Scarcity, there you go. Remember, that's the number one topic. If you can only make those two items, and you're going to make more of the other one, then you're going to give up some of this. You can't make any more. That's scarcity. And again, that's very difficult to get kids to understand. I had a teacher basically ask me, why do banks charge interest? And that is like the stupidest question I've ever heard. Banks are expensive buildings. They have security. Banks are in business to make a profit. That's why they loan money. And I have people say silly things to me like, why don't they do it for free? I mean, why don't you? I wanted to ask this person, why don't you quit your teaching job and take all your money and go build a bank and loan people money for free? That's just not the way it works, okay? Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Trade-offs. Now, what a trade-off is, if you get a little bit more of this, you give up something. Opportunity cost and efficiency. So when you take your Unit 1 test, I'm hoping that'll go well in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think I told you I wanted to give you the test next Friday. I never make it in 2 weeks. It'll be that third week. But you'll get multiple choice questions when it seems easy when I'm explaining it to you. When you see the questions, it's not that easy. But you'll get stuff like that in the questions. All right, here are the 4 key assumptions. Only 2 goods can be produced. You're writing all this down. Full employment of resources, which means, let's say that your country allows people to work 40 hours a week. Everybody's working 40 hours a week. It means there's no traffic jams on the interstate. There's no hurricane shutting it down. There's no virus. A little bit of common sense here. The power is on. The bridges are not out. I don't know how much you pay attention to the news, but I was fascinated with all that rioting that went on in Chicago the other night. I've never been to Chicago. I know there's this river down there that they put green dye in every St. Patrick's Day. I think that's when they do it. But they raised all the bridges to downtown. That's like the coolest thing I've ever seen. There's these pictures on the news. The cops raised the bridges so the people who were looting could not get to downtown. Anyway, maybe you'll find that fascinating. As a former geography teacher, I find that fascinating when you can use the environment to do stuff like that. Fixed resources. You want to asterisk this. And there's the ceteris paribus. The redneck definition is like all things being equal. Like if two people ask you to the prom, and they were equally, how do I not offend you guys? I'm just going to say it. If you want to get mad, go ahead. If they were equally attractive, at least to you, equally nice, equally talkative, equally good dancers, equally good human beings, I don't know who you want to go out with, and I don't want to know. I want to remain blissfully ignorant. I chaperoned a middle school dance my first year teaching, and that was an experience, I can tell you. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you about that on a video. Someday in class I'll tell you that story. But the deal is you've got two people you ask at the prom, everything's equal except one drives a Mercedes, so you're riding to the prom in style, and the other one has a bicycle. So you're going to have to go to the prom on the handlebars of their bicycle. Well, I mean, which one would you pick? So the deal is, ceteris paribus, when you look at a PPC or a PPF, everything else is the same. There's only one variable. Okay, I hope that makes sense. In fixed technology. Okay, all right. There are your four key assumptions. Here is the actual Google definition. All other things being equal. Did I say everything being the same, or other things held constant, or all else unchanged? I think I did pretty good. Moving on. Bikes and computers. And go ahead. I'm going to run out of time now. Go ahead and write this on your paper. You can use graph paper, but I'd rather you just, write it on your paper. I know when I used to teach, we had what we called a poor man's ruler. You just took a piece of paper, folded over 2 or 3 times, and we called it a straight edge. When I say that I grew up in the country in the middle of nowhere, I'm not kidding. My dad had about a 3rd grade education. I learned I was so embarrassed in school, I pronounced so many words wrong. You know what a colonel is in the military? It's spelled Colonel. I read it in front of the class once and said the word colonel. I learned so many words wrong because my father was so uneducated, but a lovable man. All right, so anyway, I think I've got these. You can't see the bottom of the graph. So bikes and computers. Just go ahead and write all this stuff down here, okay? Bikes and computers. Okay. What else are we going to do here? All right. So go ahead and write these. I know we're killing this, but do this again. Write all this stuff down. Remember, your notes, this is assignment number 1, maybe 4 or 5 pages long. All right. Now, let's talk about opportunity cost. And this is probably where we're going to finish up today. And I want you to write their definition. You can go ahead and pause it and write their definition. But I'm going to give you mine. And let me tell you, nobody talks this way except economists. So here's my definition of opportunity cost. Don't write mine down because it's going to be long and complicated, possibly foolish. You got 2 choices. Whichever one you choose, the opportunity cost is the one you gave up. I don't know if it was this class I talked to about reunions. I think it was. But there's a country music singer named Garth Brooks, and he has this song, and I don't really know what the song's about, and I've never looked up the lyrics. It wouldn't be hard to Google it. But the song goes something like, sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers, and all I know is he talks about seeing his ex and his wife, and I probably have the meaning of the song wrong, but I gathered that he had some girl he was in love with in high school, and he saw her 20 years later, and is like, whoo, dang, I'm glad I didn't marry her compared to my wife. And I've been to a bunch of reunions. I hope none of my old girlfriends are looking at me and saying, whoo, I could have wound up with him. I did better. But you never know. But this is what you gave up. Okay, I can tell you, when you do get married, I've been married 32 years, and I made a good decision. Don't show my wife this. Anyway, I did. She got ripped off, but I got a good deal. But the thing is, certainly at some point in your life, we'll say a car. Let's stay away from girlfriends and significant others and all that. I get myself in trouble. Let's say you could have bought, you needed money and you bought a car. And you wanted to make an investment in the car, and you wanted to keep that car for 10 years, and you had two favorites. You had to pick one. And then for the next 10 years, as you're driving that car, you may regret the one you gave up. And you may say, I could have had that one. Remember scarcity, you can't have both. Of course, the American solution is to make enough money so you can have both. But in this case, you can't. That is an opportunity cost. All right, so I guess at this point, I don't want you to write this down. You can just freeze frame it and see the questions here. At least number your paper 1 through 5. Okay? At least number your paper 1 through 5. And here's point A. And we'll do this one together. And hopefully I'll get it right, because we're 36 minutes in this video. If I mess up, I may have to record though. Actually, I'm going to leave the mistake in. I already did that. I made a pretty big foul up in one of my Euro lectures. I'm like, I am not going back to record this again. It's 9:30 and I got to go watch an episode of Peaky Blinders. Don't watch that show. You're not old enough. Okay, it's about gangsters. You know, y'all are all, peaceniks and all that. All right, so the opportunity cost from moving to A to B is, okay, so at A, they're making 14 bicycles and 0 computers. They're moving to B, okay? So at B, they're now going to have 2 computers, but looks to me, of course I'm blind in one eye and I can't see out of the other one, it looks to me like they gave up 2 bicycles. So let's see what the answer is. Well, I clicked, what happened? There we go. All right, so we're about to run out of time. I want to pause it, and you go figure the rest of these out. Then I'll come back. Then we'll come back and I'll show you the answers. So pause. Okay, here you go. All right, how did you do? Let's see what's on the next slide. We already did all that. Oh, no we don't. Tell you what, we're 37 minutes in, but I did tell you, I'm trying to get these videos to take about, actually we'll go ahead and use the time. Don't write PPC again. Just write this graph, rough it out here, and I'll at least start explaining this. And whatever we don't finish, I'll finish tomorrow. Because your essay is going to take, your FRQ is going to take every bit of 5 minutes. And I'm ambitious, so I'm going to use as much time as I can. I mean, who would you rather have? A teacher who wanted you to pass the exam or didn't? I want you to pass the exam. I mean, I've had plenty of kids who haven't passed the exam. In my opinion, there's no shame in not passing the exam. The shame is not trying. Do the best you can. There's smart people out there, and there's people who work hard. In my opinion, people who work hard beat the smart ones every day of the week. Now, if you're smart and you work hard, unbeatable combination. Now, let me tell you what this means, okay? You've drawn this, right? So underneath it, write capital goods. And remember, this goes back to the 4 factors of production, okay? Capital goods, here's what you write. These are goods that can make other goods. Keep writing. Business machinery. Okay? Then write consumer goods. Remember, this is like the guns and butter. It's representative. So here's what consumer goods are. Things like food and clothes. They're not productive goods. They're consumption goods. Now, let me just ask you a question. And of course, I'm not going to hear your answer. So, if you produce at A, you're making a bunch of machines, your people are going to be pretty miserable because they're not going to have enough consumer goods. People like consumer goods, right? If you produce at C, your people are going to be pretty daggum happy. You're making lots of Burger King Whoppers, making lots of, lattes. I'm not a Starbucks person. I went to Starbucks once on the USF campus. And I walked in and I said, this is a redneck thing. I walked in and went up to the lady at the counter and I said, I don't want none of this $7 nonsense. I actually said that. I want the cheapest thing you got. She just pointed over there. It's one of these things you pump your own coffee out. It's like 99 cents. But if you're into eating out and clothing and jewelry and watches and skateboards and kayaks, anyway, you'd be happy at sea, but you're not making enough capital goods. So now let me ask you a question. It'll be pretty much the last thing we do here. If you want to be, let's say you produce at point C. This is a philosophical, intellectual thing. You got to get this. If your country produces at sea for 4 or 5 years, where are you eventually going to be? E or D? And the correct answer is D. If you don't replace your machinery, it's going to start breaking down. And one day, you're not going to be able to produce as much because you didn't produce enough capital goods. Where do you want to produce at, A or C, if you want to be at E? Okay, if you want to produce at E, if you want to be at E one day, you need to produce at A, which means your people are miserable for a time, but eventually, in the long run, they'll make more stuff. I don't know how many of you had me for Euro. The kids had me last year. We never got to one of my favorite people to talk about. I'm not saying he's a nice person. Joseph Jugashvili, otherwise known as the Man of Steel in Russian, or Stalin, he had these things called 5-year plans. And he killed 20 million of his own people and bragged about it. But people always ask me, can socialism work, or communism, whatever you want to call it? My answer is yes. At great cost. In his case, he industrialized Russia. So he moved Russia probably from D out there to E. They lost 20 million people, but it worked. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying you got to be pretty ruthless. So anyway, that's what the capital and consumer goods mean. And we're going to stop the video here. And if you have any questions, remember you can email me.